Hi, I'm Chelsea Cooper from the Manistee Conservation District, and I'm here at Portage Lake in Onekama, Michigan, exploring what happens within our favorite inland lakes during the winter freeze and thick ice formation. Have you ever wondered what happens to the fish and if they're still swimming around under the ice? What happens to the plants during the long dark winters with no photosynthesis occurring? And what happens to microscopic life and how do those communities survive? How is the entire lake's biological structure still functioning under these extreme conditions? Many of you may recognize this as Portage Lake here in Onekama, and some of you with us today will be new to this specific area. But to give you some context, Portage Lake is one of the most unique lakes in northern Michigan because of the channel that connects it with Lake Michigan. Apart from this unique feature, Portage Lake is just like most other Michigan lakes, which is a glacial lake. This means it was formed by glaciers thousands of years ago. Glaciers were huge sheets of ice that moved slowly over the land, shaping the landscape as they went. As the glaciers moved, they carved out valleys and basins, creating lakes like Portage. So, even though we have such an exchange in currents here through the channel to the big water, air conditions are chilly enough in the winter season to drop Portage Lake's surface water below the freezing point, and a thick solid layer of ice forms over the entire lake. Something you may have wondered about is why does ice float on top of the lake if it seems so thick and heavy? Well, just like Portage Lake has unique features that make it special, there are also a few very special properties of water that make it special. One of them is the phenomenon of water's buoyancy in its solid state. One of water's really cool properties is that ice is actually less dense than liquid water. This is because the molecules that make up water are polar, meaning they are attracted to each other. So imagine water molecules are all trying to hold hands. When water is in its liquid state, the molecules are holding hands very, very tight. When the water starts to freeze, the molecules still try to hold on to each other, but they are pulled further and further apart. This causes gaps between molecules and allows this less dense frozen ice to float on top of liquid water. Pretty interesting. So what exactly happens underneath the ice in the dead of winter when photosynthesis is hindered? Photosynthesis is a process by which plants, algae, and some bacteria convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen. This process is critical for the energy balance of inland lakes and plays a major role in regulating the cycling of energy in these ecosystems. However, the way that photosynthesis cycles energy throughout an inland lake can differ depending on the season. During the summer, when there is an abundance of sunlight and warm temperatures, photosynthesis in inland lakes is at its highest. Plants and algae growing in the shallow waters of the lake absorb sunlight and use it to create energy through photosynthesis. This energy is then passed along to other organisms in the lake, such as fish and other aquatic animals, as they feed on the plants and algae. The energy continues to cycle through the food chain, with larger organisms consuming smaller ones until the energy is eventually lost to the environment through respiration or other processes. In contrast, during the winter, when sunlight is limited and temperatures are cold, photosynthesis slows down or stops altogether in many inland lakes. Plants and algae may die off or become dormant, reducing the amount of energy available in the lake. This can lead to a decrease in the population of organisms that rely on photosynthesis for energy, which can have a cascading effect throughout the food chain. As the energy available in the lake decreases, some organisms may migrate or go into hibernation to conserve energy, while others may struggle to survive.
Ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
Today we've got some equipment set up to try and take a peek under the ice to explore current conditions for plant and fish life. We've made a hole here in the ice and we've made sure that we're taking precautions to ensure safety out here on the lake. Let's see what we find. What we're seeing here is exactly what we'd expect as far as conditions under the ice. Both fish and plant life slowing down significantly during the winter. Fish in an inland lake such as Portage will generally slow down their metabolism and become less active due to the colder temperatures, as fish are primarily driven by temperature conditions. Some species of fish, such as walleye and pike, move to deeper parts of the lake where the water is warmer, while others like crappie, bluegill, and bass will congregate near structures such as rocks, logs, vegetation, or wherever they can find some protection from the cold. During this time, fish also become less interested in food and may feed less frequently. Aquatic plants are often dormant during the winter months, and during this time, the plants may reduce their photosynthetic activity, which is the process by which they produce energy from sunlight. They instead focus on conserving energy until conditions improve. In some cases, aquatic plants may die back or lose their leaves, while the roots remain alive and protected by the mud and sediment at the bottom of the lake. These plants will then regrow once the water warms up and the sunlight increases in the spring and summer. Invasive aquatic plants, such as Eurasian water milfoil, are not as sensitive to seasonal changes as native aquatic plants can be. Like many other invasive species, these plants have an increased tolerance and start to grow much earlier in the season. This gives them an advantage over our native plant communities. During the winter, zebra mussels become dormant and stop feeding, conserving energy to survive the cold. They can also attach themselves to surfaces like rocks, logs, and even other mussels to help protect themselves from the elements. So, zebra mussels can survive freezing temperatures and do not necessarily die when the lake freezes over. Like many aquatic invasive species, zebra mussels are adapted to survive in a wide range of temperatures and can withstand cold temperatures for extended periods. This allows them to get a head start on overfiltering nutrients out of the lake water and taking food from our native species. There is one very important organism that plays a very critical role in a lake's food web and is also very much involved in the energy cycling that happens within a lake's biome. This organism is very small and makes up the foundational base of the food web, fueling all other parts of the ecosystem. This role not only makes them a major foundational component of the overall food web, they're also a major source of food for fish and other aquatic life. Plankton can be found in freshwater lakes and rivers like the ones we're familiar with, and also are a foundational part of the ocean's food web as well. Plankton in the world's oceans are responsible for producing approximately 50% of the oxygen we breathe. This is because they are photosynthetic organisms that use energy from the sun to convert carbon dioxide and water into organic matter, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. It is estimated that every 1 in 5 breaths we take is oxygen created by photosynthesizing plankton. Like all life on Earth, plankton comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. In an inland lake in Michigan, a variety of plankton may be found, and there are 2 major kinds of plankton that you'll want to remember. The first is phytoplankton, which are microscopic plants, algae, and photosynthesizing bacteria. The other is zooplankton, which are animals, specifically aquatic invertebrates. Most plankton is unable to be seen with the naked eye, but there are many types of zooplankton that you can see without a microscope, although they are still very, very tiny. So the only thing you need to remember when trying to distinguish between phytoplankton and zooplankton is, does it look like a plant, or does it look like a type of bug? Try this next time you visit a pond or lake. Scoop up a glass of water and hold it up to the light. Unless the water is very dirty, you should be able to see small specks swimming around. These specks are zooplankton, some of the smallest animals you've probably ever seen. So do winter conditions affect the plankton communities like it affects fish and aquatic plant life? Using the hole that we made today, we'll lower down one of our plankton nets into the water column to see what we can find. So we're sending our net down about 10 feet, and this is a 50 micron plankton net, which means it has very, very tiny holes that our plankton should not be able to slip through very easily. So as we pull this net back up, water is being filtered through the sampler's mesh and going straight into our sample bottle. Now that we have a good sample, let's go check out what we collected under a microscope. So in the spring and summer, there are lots of different types of plankton in the lake. The phytoplankton are busy making their own food, using sunlight, and serving as food for the rest of the lake, including zooplankton. In the wintertime, things are a little different. The water gets colder and there's less sunlight, so there aren't as many phytoplankton using the sunlight as fuel to create energy. Without the phytoplankton, there aren't as many plankton either. But that doesn't mean that there's no plankton at all. Some types of phytoplankton can survive in cold water by slowing down and conserving energy, like we learned fish also do. So even though there are fewer plankton, they're still a very important and functioning part of the overall lake system. As you can see in the sample from Portage Lake that we collected with our plankton net, we're seeing some variety of plankton, but not much. I wonder what our sample might look like under the microscope when our plankton have access to sunlight and are able to cycle energy through the lake's food web. Do you think our sample would look a lot different if we collected it in a warmer season? Let's explore some live plankton samples taken from Portage Lake earlier today. Next to your microscope station, you'll find an activity sheet. Pay attention to what you see under the microscope and compare it to what you saw in the previous video and the amount of plankton we were seeing in the winter. Start viewing your sample under the lowest magnification and work your way up from there, being sure to note what you're viewing on your activity sheet. You will find different sizes of plankton under different magnification settings, but the lowest setting is a great place to start. Please ask for help if you need it and have fun. Welcome back! I hope you had an exciting time exploring the live plankton samples under the microscope. Let's take a moment to summarize what you observed and compare it to the winter conditions we discussed earlier. Take a moment to review your activity sheet and reflect on the differences you notice between the samples collected in different seasons. As you examine your activity sheet, consider the changes in plankton abundance, diversity, and behavior between the two seasons. Did you notice any differences in the size, shape, or color of the plankton organisms? Were there more or fewer plankton species present during the winter compared to now? By comparing the plankton samples collected in different seasons, we can gain a deeper understanding of how environmental conditions affect the abundance and diversity of these vital organisms. The seasonal variations shape the delicate balance of life in our inland lakes. It's amazing to witness the transformations that occur throughout the year and how they impact the overall ecosystem. When we consider the intricate dynamics of our local ecosystem and the role that plankton play in sustaining life within it, the more we understand about these tiny organisms, and the better equipped we are to protect and preserve the delicate balance of our inland lakes like Portage. Throughout our exploration of lakes in the winter, we've covered some key concepts such as photosynthesis and energy cycling. Remember, photosynthesis is the process by which plants, algae, and some bacteria convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into energy and oxygen. During the winter, photosynthesis slows down or stops in many inland lakes due to limited sunlight and cold temperatures. This impacts the overall energy cycling in the lake ecosystem. Compare the energy cycling in the winter to other seasons and think about how it influences the food web. Let's also revisit the topic of aquatic invasive species. As you know, aquatic invasives have a detrimental impact on our local lake ecosystems, as well as the Great Lakes. In northern Michigan, we face challenges from species like zebra mussels, Eurasian water milfoil, and many others. These invasive species outcompete native plants and animals, disrupting the balance of the ecosystem, and have had a detrimental impact on the delicate balance of the ecosystem. Zebra mussels, for instance, are notorious for their rapid reproduction, with millions of eggs being laid each year. As they multiply, they form dense clusters that attach themselves to various surfaces, including rocks, pipes, and even native mussel shells. Their presence leads to the clogging of habitat areas and an excessive filtration of water, removing essential nutrients that native species depend on. This disruption in the ecosystem can harm the overall biodiversity and stability of the environment. Similarly, Eurasian water milfoil poses a significant threat to our Great Lakes. This aquatic plant grows rapidly, forming thick mats that cover the water's surface. These dense mats can impede the movement of animals and prevent sunlight from reaching native aquatic plants, hindering their growth and survival. The encroachment of Eurasian water milfoil can also alter the composition of the shoreline, affecting the habitat and food sources for various organisms. It's crucial for us to be aware of the damage caused by these invasive species and take measures to mitigate their impact on the delicate balance of our local ecosystem. So what can we personally do? As stewards of our local lakes, it's important for us to take action and contribute to their preservation. There are a few different things we can practice just as individuals. One of the most important things is to help stop the spread of aquatic hitchhikers. Clean, drain, dry is a very well-known method. When going between streams or lakes, always be sure to wipe your shoes or your waders down before leaving. To briefly highlight some other threats, pollution entering a lake can come from various sources, some point source and some non-point source. A lot of pollution comes from non-point and is simply just runoff from lawns adjacent to the water's edge. Nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen from lawn treatments end up in the lake and can cause imbalances. Garbage and litter are also a big threat, as well as industrial dumping. Sedimentation is another one of the biggest threats to our lakes and streams, which can cause narrowing of stream channels or the burying of important habitat due to increased development and seawall installation. Being informed is one of the greatest ways you can assist the cause. Stewardship can be practiced just by volunteering in the community with local environmental groups and just being invested in your local resources. When we all work together, we can make a difference. Thank you for completing our exploration of lakes in the winter. Through our study, we have gained valuable insights into the intricate web of life that exists within our inland lake. As we conclude, I want to remind you that the coming generations are our most important assets when it comes to conservation. You are the future stewards of our environment, entrusted with the responsibility of preserving and protecting the natural beauty that surrounds us. Each and every one of us has a stake in this, and our actions today will shape the outcomes of our region tomorrow. By actively participating in the conservation of our local ecosystems, we have the power to make a positive and lasting impact. So let's continue to learn, explore, and take action, knowing that we hold the key to a sustainable future for our beloved community and its precious lakes. Also, a thank you to the U.S. Forest Service for funding conservation-based education, and to the Portage Lake Watershed Forever for donating the equipment needed to create these videos.